My name is Michael Day. I'm a resident of Chelmer Village and I'm taking an interest in the appeal site since it was first proposed to develop Springfield Lyons Business Park in the early 80s when I was a member of a residents' action group. I wish to amplify and expand upon my statement of objection submitted by the Planning Inspectorate of 22nd of October 2017 in the light of seeing the submissions on behalf of the appellants. In doing so, I wish to strongly support the case of refusal made by Chelmsford City Council and other objectors. The relevance of the planning history of the area. Much reference has been made by the appellants to the 1999 Section 106 agreement being no longer enforceable and therefore of no planning consequence in this case, and the lack of planning relevance of the 1984 Essex County Council design brief. I think you've got copies of the brief, haven't you, Mum? The actual document.
I think you provided me with copies.
Right.
This one is.
Great. That's it. This. Yeah. However, I would disagree on the point of planning relevance. In relation to the Section 106, this is the old Section 106, the fact remains that it was the clear intention of one local authority, Essex County Council, serving the local community, to undertake to another local authority, Chelmsford Borough Council, serving that same community, that the land in question be managed for its use as open space with public access. Whether by deliberate act or much more likely unintended omission in subsequent related applications, the local community has not been able to enjoy what was promised. Nevertheless, in planning terms, Section 106 demonstrates the jointly recognised importance by both local authorities of the accepted need for the ongoing provision and protection of the buffer area as part of the overall landscape framework of the whole development as originally indicated in the 1984 design brief, adopted as supplementary planning guidance by the Borough in 1986. It should be remembered that originally Essex County Council proposed to develop commercially the whole of what is now the buffer area along the Chelmer Village Way. However, following adverse public response and representations from the Borough, it was persuaded to reserve the land as, in inverted commas, recreational space and buffer, and that's in paragraph 1.3 of the design brief. This is reinforced by the land's allocation as open space in successive iterations of local planning policy, to which, as far as I'm aware, Essex County Council has never objected, thus indicating ongoing relevance of the allocation in planning terms, which also ensured its role as an open buffer so far as both local authorities are concerned. Although the 1984 design brief is no longer supplementary planning guidance, its influence is clear to see today, with the Springfield Lyons development closely mirroring the suggested layout therein. I've attached two figures to my original representation, which is also attached at the back, Ma'am. The two plans right at the back of your little package there. The first one, MD1, is taken as an extract from the design brief, and you'll see the appeal site at the bottom there with the pitch and putt course and the formal gardens as originally suggested, and the landscape framework of the Springfield Lyons development with the various plots lettered, and of course the Bronze Age settlement. And if you turn over, this is, although I haven't been able to quite get the right image on the copy of the aerial photograph, you can see clearly that it's almost a mirror, almost an exact mirror in fact, of the road layout and the plot layout of the eventual development. And the CHP building there has been built within the last 5 years, I think. So you can see right up until more or less the present time, that plan has been the guiding hand in the development of this area, notwithstanding it's no longer supplementary planning guidance. Moreover, even following the dismissal of the 2007 appeal, the opportunity was still there for the landowner to have left the potential to extend Springfield Lyons' approach to facilitate access to the rear in the hope of unlocking some development potential from the appeal site. However, subsequent building of the CHP scheme precluded that possibility, showing the ongoing influence of the brief and the acceptance of the buffer role of the site. The point I'm making there, Ma'am, is that as I'll come to later, if that land was ever to be developed, it should have taken its access from the rear, and that was indeed the original proposal at the time in 1981. but was subsequently changed to preclude any possibility of access, as you see from the road layout. Okay. So I go on to say, thus, notwithstanding the attempts to limit public access, its open buffer role and the site's consequent amenity value in the townscape of the area is even more important now that the development of the business park is more or less complete. Moreover, its particular amenity and townscape value of this established feature was highlighted by the appeal inspector in 2007, characteristics which have not materially changed since that time. In my view, this amenity and townscape value is particularly well illustrated in the attached aerial photo, and that's MD3, which is attached to midway on my piece here, showing the wider area of the appeal site. It's the. May I suggest you turn it to a landscape to get a better view. In my view, this amenity and townscape value is particularly well illustrated, showing the wider area. The effectiveness of the concept of the buffer area along the southern boundary of the commercial development of Springfield Lyons and associated development abutting the village. I think you can see from the aerial photo the constant green swathe there from the appeal site through between that and the village. How this open space buffer is clearly part of and links into the strong landscape framework of the commercial elements. That you may recall that the park itself, one of the concepts was to have this strong landscape framework, and this open space was part of that. It wasn't a spare piece of land, it was part of the landscape framework of the whole of the industrial site of Springfield Lyons. This particular character is highlighted when compared with the older industrial commercial estate served by the New Duke's Way a little to the south. You can see the older industrial estate on this map. And how important this buffer area is as part of the landscape framework and layout of Chelmer Village itself. So I think when you simply try and look at the green space framework there, you'll see how that links to, and it is clearly part, in my view, of this concept of landscape framework. And indeed, then, how adverse and unacceptable the impact would be by such a significant bite being taken out of the buffer area and at such a critical point by this proposed development. So one can envisage, by looking at this plan just above the words Chelmer Village Way, how that would impact if that were the same colour as one of these factories, how much that would impact on the concept of that landscape framework. Now I appreciate that. No, that's prior to the nursery, Mum. That's in that triangle in there. I would just go back though to the original concept plan at the back of my little package. You can see originally it was intended as the parking area for the public open space at that point, with an access in Cooten Hall Lane, access and egress in Cooten Hall Lane. I would like to make some reference to the nursery slightly later on in my submission. Now I know this section is not in contention, but I feel I must make these points for my own benefit if nobody else is in this inquiry. And that's about the site planning and design of this particular scheme.
This is a particular concern of yours that you raised that you felt wasn't covered by the name.
That's right, yeah. So this leads to one aspect where I disagree with the local planning authority, namely the appropriateness of the physical design and layout of the scheme. In my view, given its relative bulk and mostly three-storey form, the development is out of scale and character with a generally well set back two-storey residential development and the relatively generous green spaces further along Chelmer Village Way. This form of development did not just happen, as the village was laid out in accordance with a planning and design brief 1977 requiring these features, which itself had been influenced by the thinking of the then influential 1973 Essex Design Guide. The building itself, because of its approximately L-shaped form, will, in my view, be visually jarring, presenting a slab-like effect when approached from either direction and hence not harmonious with the street scene. Moreover, it would be the only building of this scale along Chelmer Village Way, and not too dissimilar in size, bulk and scale to the budget hotels near the Boreham interchange on the A12. For example, there's the Premier Inn there, it's got 80 rooms. The use of Chelmer Village Way for the access is also out of character with the area, as most development takes access from side roads. This would create an uncharacteristic wide gap in the frontage to serve this single development. Furthermore, it is my view that the layout gives the impression of being squeezed as close as possible to the nursery in an attempt to justify a transition with the commercial buildings to the west, where the appellants say it attempts to mirror the plot locations of other buildings in the area. If the site was to be developed and a transition type scheme designed, then in my view, as I indicated above, it should have taken access from the road layout of Springfield Lyons estate or shared with a nursery. Any built form should have been small in scale and have been placed at the back of the site, leaving a much more generous open frontage to Chelmer Village Way, and preferably no more than 2 stories set in generous landscaping to match the Springfield Lyons concept and other examples within it. However, these opportunities have been missed by the landowner. Such a layout would, of course, have fallen foul of the important ecological considerations, and of course they've only come to light relatively recently in the planning history of this particular site. And it only serves to emphasise that this site is not a spare piece of land, but an integral part of the Springfield Lyons open space landscape framework, and important to conserve. Thus I contend that not only is this development out of character with Chelmer Village, but in my view is also not well related to Springfield Lyons, of which this site is a part. This type of care home development is relatively footloose in locational terms. If the site is partially developed in this way, not only will it be an ungainly development for years to come, but will unacceptably and unnecessarily undermine the open buffer separating the commercial elements of Springfield Lyons with the village, to the detriment of the special character and amenity of the area, identified as influentially important by the inspector at the previous appeal, please see paragraphs 12 and 13 of his decision letter, and an area which I feel has an almost magical character, having been subject to human habitation use over thousands of years. Hence, respectfully, I believe that these design and site planning shortcomings and impacts add to the weight to be given in favour of refusal of this scheme. Now, the next section is about what I understood, or what little I understood, about what was being proposed in the unilateral undertaking. Nevertheless, I feel some of the points here will obviously be dealt with later, but I would like at least to mention some of them. So I understand that the applicants are offering a unilateral undertaking to facilitate and create public access to the remainder of the site and a management plan which will assist in creating a wild park. Works that can only be achieved by the proposed development. Those are quotes which I've taken from the evidence provided by the appellants. I also understand that Essex County Council will be responsible for the ongoing management and maintenance, not the developer. This raises the question as to whether this offer can be put in the planning balance in favour of the applicants. No doubt this will be fully explored in the inquiry, and I trust my misgivings of the real value of these proposals set out in my objections can be answered. In addition to which, I would be concerned to know how the local planning authority can enforce against another local planning authority if indeed mention's been made of this. I'm sure somebody's got the answer to that. When did Essex County Council secure the relevant member delegated authority to commit to ongoing involvement in the management and maintenance of the land, and for how long? I'm interested to know what their side of the story is on the legal agreement. How much council taxpayer money will be expended on this role now and in the future? If any will, then in my view this will diminish the value of this offer in planning balance, especially when there is, I understand, at least one serious and plausible alternative approach to the future management of the whole site. Thus the landowners do not need a development which is contrary to policy in order to achieve long-term management of the site. For the reasons I've given above, and for those I've set out in related objections and representations set out during the appeal process, I trust, I respectfully request that the appeal be dismissed. May I, though, mention a couple of other points from my initial representation as it's been mentioned in the opening remarks. And that's about the nursery. So that's section 3 in the added section there. I note that the appellants cite the new nursery as a precedent for their own development. I note that the planning authority concluded that it was a finely balanced decision. I note also that little, if any, reference was made to the earlier planning context in the delegated report, and consider that had it been taken into account, a different conclusion may well have been reached. Furthermore, I have always understood that the number of public comments of itself was not a material consideration, rather it was what was said in those comments. Having said that, I believe many others did not hear about this application until after the event. What is clear to me is that the cumulative impact of the appellant's development taken together with the new nursery is of very similar scale and land take as the early commercial scheme refused on appeal. Moreover, unlike the mainly 3-storey appeal proposal cited along Chelmer Village way frontage, the physical and visual impact of the nursery is to a degree minimised by its single-storey profile and orientation towards Cooten Hall Lane, and by being located on the eastern extremity of the buffer. It is also partly located on an area originally intended as car parking to serve the 12-acre open space. That was the plan I mentioned, ma'am. Notwithstanding the more local benefit of the nursery, serving as it does the immediate local area, some may say 2 wrongs don't make a right. This is a view with which I would concur. I submit, therefore, that far from being a justification for the appeal proposal, it would exacerbate its adverse impact by the cumulative impact of both developments on site of similar scale to the impact found unacceptable by the 2007 appeal inspector. And finally, if I may also just make a comment in relation to the opening submissions by the appellant. If I understood it correctly, so forgive me if I haven't understood, I think it was said that the appellants are saying that they doubt if DC 39 is engaged. I took that to mean relevant. As you probably will know, that in their planning statement in February 2017, they accepted that there was a degree of conflict with DC 39. And also the reason they gave for withdrawing the first application was to deal with the open space matters, which of course are directly related to DC 39. They also said that Essex have not dedicated the land as open space. Well, clearly they promised to do so in 1999, and whether it's the collective memory of both local authorities that failed, or more likely simply it just wasn't picked up. There's no evidence to suggest that they deliberately didn't do that. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Day, before we get to that plan, just if I may, a few questions. In your original submission to the appeal, which you've also put in again on back of this document, you made a number of points, and I just want to take you up, please, on some of the points. You described in your original submission that you described this site, and by the site I mean the whole thing edged in red.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, what para, ma'am?
Your 1.2.
1.2, thanks.
You described the site as being an integral and crucial part of the Springfield Lyons Business Park site. This land was not laid out, was it, as space when the buildings that we now see, the Chat building, for example, was erected?
Well, the Springfield Lyons development has taken many years to come to fruition.
I appreciate that.
And
I wasn't asking about how long it was taken. Just focus on my questions. Sometimes when you go to business parks, you see open space around buildings. You see buildings set in very large green areas, and those are part of the estate, and they are managed by the estate, and they look quite manicured. I'm suggesting to you that the situation here was never like that, and that when that Chat building, for example, was erected, the red line, my appeal site, was never laid out at that stage as part of the business.
I'm not familiar with the chat building, sorry, what's that one?
It's the office block that you
Oh, the latest one?
Yes.
Yeah.
From Chelmer Village Way.
That was only built 5 years ago. We're talking about plans that were laid 30
Can you
years ago.
focus on the question?
I'm trying to understand it. Sorry, I'm not being awkward. I'm a bit confused about what you're trying to get at.
I'm saying that the appeal site was not laid out as part of the business park.
Well, the business part wasn't laid out as a whole at the start. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's in a phased way.
We maybe can at least agree that point. Can I move on? Because there are lots of questions I could ask.
Okay.
I'm going to ask quite a lot of them
Fine.
the next witness. So I'm trying to keep my questions short. The development brief. What evidence do you have that the County Council's development brief was ever adopted as supplementary planning guidance by the then Chelmsford Borough Council?
It says in the appeal statement evidence that it was adopted on the 22nd of May 1986 as supplementary planning guidance.
Appeal statement evidence, what are you referring to?
The evidence given by the member of the planning department of Chelmsford Council gave a date of when it was adopted as supplementary planning guidance of 22nd May 1986.
Do you accept that it is no longer formally part of the council's supplementary planning?
Yes, of course.
Good. Thank you. On to other topics. The plan in front of you.
Yep.
Do you see there the land edged in yellow, where the proposed care home would go?
Yep.
Do you see to the east of that some lines? They're sort of grey in colour, going from the road up in the north. There's a grey line just to the east of what would be my proposed access.
Oh yes, sorry. Yes, I'm with you. Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no key. That line is intended to represent the informal, what's described as the informal route, or routes. There are two grey lines, aren't there? One is linked into another.
Yes.
Do you agree that that's an accurate representation of the informal route on the appeal site?
What, the actual route
Yes.
that's there at the moment? You mean your
Yes.
footpath? There are many routes there. I've taken different routes to that one across this site before.
So
It's not. I mean,
well, when the inspector goes to go on the site, if that's what she chooses to do, you can see, can't you, that there is a
along that hedge there is definitely a route along that hedge, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely.
And there is no route that one can see, I'm suggesting to you, on the land which is edged in yellow.
No, I've never walked across there. I've walked across. Well, I say I've never walked across there. I may have cut across. You see that? You see the tree? There's a tree just to the on the northern boundary.
Yes.
It's just that dark way. It's on the red line just to the north there. See the words proposed development. If you just went up the plan and then slightly to the right, there's a sort of dark circle there. That's a that's a tree. Yeah. See that point?
Yes.
And that. So I'm in the past, and whether others have as well, but in the past I've walked up to that, across there to that point. I do have an additional aerial photograph here of footpath links in the area. And that's.
I can't cross-examine you on documents I haven't got.
No, I appreciate that.
So can we agree that this plan is an accurate representation of the informal routes, these grey lines?
It's one of many.
Are you saying that there are other informal routes that can be which are readily apparent on the ground? I mean, I've gone and walked this site, and it seemed to me that that was an accurate representation of the path I walked along.
Well, if you're talking about the site as a whole, I have to say yes, there are many more routes. May I submit this aerial photograph, if it helps, ma'am? No, I didn't realise I'd be cross-examined on this point.
I think it might be helpful to these
Can you give one to the inspector? Sorry, myself. I don't know when this photograph was taken, but when I was trying to research what I was going to say, I came across it. It's obviously before the latest office building, because it's not there anymore.
It's also predates the nursery.
Predates the nursery as well, Mum. Yes. I don't think we're at cross purposes, Mum. All I'm saying is there are many more routes, and you can see from that map that there are.
Yes.
But I accept that there aren't that many in the area where the yellow line is, if that's what you're trying to get to.
Thank you. Second point, please, that you make both in your previous representations and you repeat again today. You reference attempts to limit public access in your 8.7 for example.
Yeah.
And you reference in A3 the community has not been able to enjoy what was promised. But presumably, Mr. Day, insofar as this development would secure an obligation upon the landowner, first of all, not to build on the rest of the land, you would welcome that?
Certainly, if the land is going to be developed as per the 1999 situation, yes, absolutely.
Insofar as
But that was open. The whole site would be open then.
yes, there was no. I'm not going to get involved in what that document did or didn't say, but life moved on. We're now in 2018. The inspector can only deal with the situation as it is today, Mr. Day.
Yeah, but I'm a bit over there.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Day. Presumably, you would also welcome the fact that this development would secure a binding obligation on the county as a landowner to make, first of all, improvements to the informal footpath route in order to enable it to become a permissive footpath?
As you know, I've questioned whether or not this is a real agreement or not.
Setting aside that,
I'm happy to answer the question on that basis.
You're not a lawyer, but do you not welcome the idea that the informal route is improved so that it can become a more formal public route?
I'd welcome the idea it would be managed on the basis of a wildlife park, whether that's the route or not. I haven't got a comment on, because obviously others may have a better idea than me as to whether that should be the route or whether there should be many more routes.
It's right, isn't it, that the land is lower, the land edge red sits lower than the public footpath along Chelmer Village Way?
If you've done a survey, visually there are different heights in that land.
Have you walked? You must have walked, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I've walked on.
You have to go down, don't you? It's quite steep.
There are bits that are down, bits that are up.
Yes. Mr. Day, come on.
Well,
when you walk on that footpath, it goes down very steeply quite quickly.
Sorry, which footpath, Mum, are you talking about?
I'm on the informal route, the bottom of the informal route from Chelmsford Village Way.
Yes, that informal route.
Yes.
You imply it's the only informal route. It's not the only route. I hope I've established that. It does go down, yes, because there's a stream down there. Yes,
Yes.
that's why.
And there's also the point, isn't there, that the landowner here has been quite keen to ensure that vehicular access onto this land is not easy.
Yeah, there's a gate on Chelmer Village Way, as you know.
Yes.
That gate there is more like an agricultural access
Yes.
or a maintenance access. The other, along the red line on the southern boundary here, there's a post and wire fence which was
Yes.
put up. There's no possibility of vehicular
Yes.
access down there, and that's where many people walk and get access.
Yes. It's a simple point. If you were the county council, you would want to try and ensure that no travellers, for example, could readily gain access to this land.
You don't need a post and wire fence to stop
No, you
travellers
don't.
down there.
But what has happened here is that the lie of the land, the bunding, and the uneven ground has effectively, again, served to prevent that, hasn't it?
Well, I can't see why that was a relevant point, really. I'm not sure where you're going on that.
Don't worry about where I'm going.
Well, sorry, I'm trying to answer your questions, but they're rather obscure, I'm afraid, for me.
So, Mr. Day, can we agree that in a world where the yellow land, go back to this plan, in a world where the yellow land is developed, informal or more formal public access will still be available, won't it, to the majority of the rest of the site, the land edge red?
Well, obviously it's a bigger site, yeah.
Yeah. The ecological value of all the land beyond the yellow area is retained, isn't it, in a development world?
It's squeezed up, yeah. You have to have replacement.
Well,
Yeah.
when you say it's squeezed up,
Yeah, up to the north there. Isn't that where the special relocation is going to be?
are you aware that there are areas of ecological importance on the site which accommodate great crested newts?
Yes.
Yes. Are you aware that those areas have been laid out as part of other permissions which the council has allowed?
Yes.
Yes. None of those areas are going to be affected by this development, are they?
I'll take your word for it. I'm sorry, I don't know that. Didn't know that.
And so far as the Bronze Age enclosure is concerned, the management of that for the future, is that something that you would welcome?
Certainly.
And it's right to say, isn't it, that in the 2007 appeal decision, the inspector was entirely happy about the townscape impacts, as it were, of that proposal, the car showroom proposal. Do you remember that?
I do. I don't recall that part of the evidence, no. Part of the decision letter. Yeah, quite the contrary. I thought the whole point was that the inspector made that, the open space and character of the townscape character of the area, one of the main planks of the reason why he refused the scheme.
I'm going to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with it with you. I'm going to go to this letter. One is going to be with Mrs. Hutchinson. Have you had the opportunity of looking at the heritage impact assessment?
No, I haven't, no.